get into your backlog, figure out what you can get done. Last thing we need is a Jira queue that doesn't get actioned. Execution will push your SEO forward in 2026. I'm Michael MacMillan, and this is SEO in 2026.
Michael, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
While we're seeing AI, it's flooding the web with content. We're also seeing it like just assisting teams to get these huge strategies and these plans. And what we're seeing is that we're still not seeing it getting executed.
Okay, so what does execution actually mean then?
So if somebody's gone through and done an SEO audit, they've explored all the opportunities, they've gone through the competitor set, they've gone through what you have for existing content and for how you're performing. And then you get this beautiful list of what you should do to get things done. And much like going to the physio, here's a list of the exercises that you should do when you're not at the physio. And then in that meantime, between the visits to the SEO or to the physio, the work's not getting done.
Okay, so when you say AI is flooding the web with content, are you saying that part of the execution is definitely not using AI in the production of the content that you intend to execute on?
Oh, no, I think there's actually a place for using AI. It's great at analyzing data. It's great for giving a first draft of a piece of content. We're leveraging it to get the content briefs put together and to get those content pieces and get like a first draft of content. But a lot of the time we're seeing things getting shelved.
Why do you think they're getting shelved?
I think priorities just start getting pulled. It's sometimes the concept of like it could be a whole lot to get done. We've seen a lot of marketing teams dealing with like less people, so less people to actually execute, and they're having to rely on other sources to get things done.
And what can an agency do if they're facing a client that's saying, we can't prioritize this at the moment, we've got too much on? What can an agency do to actually get their project top of mind and increase the urgency on it?
Well, there's two approaches to this. One is to get the internal stakeholders for your client on board with it, explaining where the opportunities lie. When you come up with a list of opportunities, prioritize that list. What's potentially going to give the biggest ROI, and what can we get implemented right now? And if they're having an issue with execution or they're getting pulled in multiple different directions, step up and offer to execute. That's one thing we've been rolling out quite frequently in the last, I'd say about 18 months, is including execution in with strategy.
So you say have a conversation about ROI. How do you determine the ROI of a content project?
Ooh, there's so many different levers for that. It's hard to say. There's not one piece on that. But if it's, you do like the classic matrix. If it's low effort and high return, if you get the 4 quadrants, then I would prioritize that right away. Or if it's something that can be rolled out at scale, if something you can be applied at like a template level, let's say putting article schema on a handful of articles, or if you can point out where they're going to get the most return. I would say prioritize things in where we can see a quick lift and we can implement very quickly, where it's probably really good practice and we should start working on it now. Like the old joke is like the best time to start exercising was 10 years ago and the second best time is now.
So when you say kind of most teams don't have a strategy problem, they've got an implementation problem, is this something that is becoming more of an issue now than it used to be a couple of years ago?
I feel it's almost the same. This has been an issue I've seen in the last, I don't know, in 8 years I've been out on my own, and particularly consulting, where before I was on the agency side, we were providing direction and then expecting teams internally to execute. And we would even prioritize tickets in Asana or Jira, and they would just you might get a first like lift where people start going through and start implementing things, and then priorities get shifted. Their focus isn't 100% SEO. Their focus is marketing as a whole, and the queue keeps getting bigger. So if you keep providing more direction, keep discovering new opportunities, you're just adding to a queue that's not getting executed.
Got you. Okay. So AI has obviously made it easier to uncover things to do, but not necessarily made it easier to do the things. So when you've got a growing list of things to do, maybe you've got 100 plus things to do, how do you start to prioritize, or how do you start to walk through a client with assisting them to help to prioritize what to do first?
The things that, like I said, can get an easier lift, or sorry, that are less effort, but would provide a bigger lift. I'd say build your foundation first. Like what can we do that we can do at a template level? to change, say, how the structure of like how article pages are or product service pages are, that get us SERP features, help search engines and even LLMs digest that content in a better way. And then start moving on to, I would say, the more longer term projects. Link building, for an example, is something you want to start as soon as possible because you're not going to see the return for a while, but you want to get it implemented now so that you'll start to see return before the project's up.
What does good link building look like in 2026?
Ooh, I would say that's a really great question. I would say good link building, it's still like a community engagement based approach. Is this actually useful? Like links for the sake of links is just noise. If you're starting with nothing, that can probably help give an initial lift. But if you're dealing with established brands like we deal with, just getting a link for the sake of a link is not necessarily worth it. When it's a link from somebody that's part of your extended community or somebody that's that related to what you're offering, it can be a really strong play and it can help build partnerships. We like to approach it from more of like a community-based approach than just building links for the sake of links.
And so you say, obviously, in relation to all the tasks that SEOs have to do and the growing list of tasks, the backlog is where good SEO goes to die.
Yeah.
Do you maybe have to break down the tasks into something that humans have to be involved in, and perhaps other tasks that you can perhaps completely automate or you use AI to implement? So I'm thinking that perhaps you definitely use humans in the production of content, or at least some aspects of the production of content for maybe product pages, for example. But then maybe you've identified 10,000 pages in your site that all have the same page title, and you want to make sure that each of those pages have a unique page title. So perhaps you'd do that, but you'd automate it and you'd use AI to do it, and you just want to get it done and not even look at it, because probably a change is better than no change at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so essentially you're comfortable for some of the long tail list items on the list of things to do for it just to be done automatically and not even checked over with human eyes.
I'd say spot check. It depends on the size of your site. If you're dealing with like an e-commerce site that's got a whole pile of pages that you're not, I wouldn't say you're generating the titles with AI necessarily, but you're coming up with a structure that's systematic, variable based. So like product name and whatever's unique like about that product, like say color, size, or something like that is a secondary piece of content to generate the title. If you're starting to notice things falling off, then you can dig deeper into why that's fallen off. And if you're seeing something that's a pattern, you can roll it out broadly across the whole site.
And you also say having an audit means nothing if fixes aren't getting shipped. I mean, do you see more clients nowadays getting audits and feeling good that they've got an audit, but not actually doing anything about it?
I've seen it my whole career. People getting that audit, that beautiful report that tends to sit on the shelf, or they action one or two things, and then it just kind of gets deprioritized. Keeping an SEO on your team, either as a contractor or in-house, on a long-term basis, who's actually executing on that too, can really help keep pushing things forward and keep moving things in the right direction.
And you also say that an SEO needs to work with real-world CMS and dev constraints, not against them. What does that actually mean?
Just dealing with sites that have restrictions. WordPress, Webflow, Squarespace, Wix, they all have their own restrictions, their own things that they don't quite work. I've got a client right now, smaller service-based business that's in Squarespace, and there's just things you can't roll out in Squarespace. Like I can't copy over a CTA to multiple pages. I have to do it manually on each individual page, which takes a lot of work, for example.
So it's essentially just accepting the things that can't be done. No, not having an idealistic perspective on this is what I want to do and we have to change CMS. Just accepting that, if the dev team and the marketing team want to keep the existing CMS, you're not going to be able to do certain things, and focus on the things that you can do.
Focus on what you can change. Yeah. And don't get hung up on, don't die on that hill that just not going to, it may give a little bit of a lift, but is it worth pushing everything, especially if it's well out of the budget for them to switch CMSs?
But I guess it's still worthwhile asking the question, why are we with this CMS? Why were these decisions made? And is it possible at some point in the future that we might be willing to move?
I definitely, I'll create a prioritized list, and there's like the must happens. It'd be nice if we can do this. And these are the things you need to consider if there's ever a site redevelopment. And one of those things will be like, these are the restrictions of the current CMS we're working with. And these are other CMSs that don't have these restrictions. And if we're going to switch, this has to be part of the discussion when you're ready to switch.
Right, okay. And you also say execution reveals new opportunities you won't find in a spreadsheet. So what would be one or two examples of these new opportunities that you can find that aren't in spreadsheets?
It's something that comes up all the time, especially when we're implementing content. One thing we'll do right now with clients is we'll work with a content writer. We'll use AI for a first draft of it, a content brief. We'll get it in front of a content writer who specializes in that space. And they'll act more editorial. And then we'll take over the executing, the publishing of the piece of content. And some things that won't come across when we're pulling that out is like getting an unordered list in the table of contents at the beginning of the piece of content. As you're reading through that piece of content, should we just blurt out that this is a table of contents, or how can we make that seem more real, more smooth as we're coming through there? And one thing I find that comes up a lot is internal linking opportunities. Variants on the keyword that you didn't consider. You say you did a screaming frog crawl for all these variants that you'd come up with, but as you're reading through it, you're like, no, this topic is actually talking about what I was talking about. It just wasn't the exact phrase that we had flagged for exploring for internal linking. I find internal linking is one of those ones that comes up on a regular basis. And just as you're reading through that content and digesting it, new topics, new ideas come up, ways to expand on that piece of content.
Interesting that you talked about coming up with an exact phrase that you'd come up with to use in internal linking. Do you think coming up with a very specific keyword phrase for internal linking is still just as important in the age where we're probably moving towards optimizing for long tail questions that have little search volume?
I think we're definitely going that way, especially with LLMs. No one queries like ChatGPT with HR software. They ask very specific questions about the HR software. There's a lot of follow-up prompts to that, for an example. And we'll see that type of thing happen with AI overviews as well, directly in the SERP. I think that's definitely the way things are going.
Something else you also mentioned in your previous answer was the incorporation of an unordered list within a piece of content. Are there elements that you tend to want to see within content nowadays in order to be a little bit more appealing to AI search engines?
Proper heading structure. I'd say like classic SEO best practices. Table of contents is helpful. If you can, with that jump list, it gets a little bit further along. Segmenting the content out into proper heading structure that cascades down, starting with an H1 down to an H2, and not like jumping to an H3, or like not having that randomness of like a heading that doesn't make sense and doesn't cascade down the way you'd expect it to. Chunking your content up and just logical pieces that fit under these headings makes sense as well.
Right, okay. And in terms of getting things done, there are many reasons why you're not necessarily going to get done what you want to do, and including perhaps working with other teams internally. Are there other teams, maybe social teams, analytics teams, conversion rate teams, that SEOs absolutely need to be working with more in 2026 in order to get more done?
I mean, I've always wanted, I wouldn't say it's in 2026, but generally I'd love to see teams working with CROs, just so they can, like, if somebody's not engaging with that piece of content, then what's the point? Anything, the social team, your community management people, like the social team, whatever content they're putting out, pushing around social channels, what kind of questions are coming back, what kind of comments are coming back, how can we refine the piece of content to answer those types of questions and comments? Then as well, like the community engagement team, what kind of things are happening, where are we hearing on Reddit and then Core? I actually haven't been on Core for a while, but Reddit's a great example of like the people asking questions about your product and would be an unbiased source. Those types of questions, if somebody's asking it on Reddit, there's a good chance they've asked it on a Google search as well, especially if you see it more than a couple times.
Michael, what's the key takeaway from the tips you shared today?
Get into your backlog, figure out what you can get done. Last thing we need is a Jira queue that doesn't get actioned. Execution will push your SEO forward in 2026.
Michael MacMillan is founder and principal at MacMillan Search. You can find him over at macmillansearch.com. Michael, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.